Hi, hi.
Hey, good to see you, Tim. How you doing, buddy?
Hello. I'm just fine. How are you?
Doing all right. Took an extended time off between the 4th of July and my birthday. Did a lot of fun things. Set off fireworks in the nearby park, which was fun. And we had an excess of fireworks, so I invited several of the neighborhood teenagers who happened to be passing through looking for a show to light some off. And it could have been a liability issue if they exploded their hand or set anything on fire, but they didn't. So I like to think that I contributed to the delinquency of some teenagers, as I think there's never been a better time to know how to set off explosives.
That sounds like a good weekend. Yeah.
Do you have any national holidays in the Netherlands that involve blowing things up?
We do it at the end of the year,
Yeah.
but not the coming year because they just banned it last week. So
Oh no.
retroactively, last year was the last year you could set off fireworks.
Damn.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are people going to do it anyway? I mean, there's lots of places in the United States, including Seattle, where setting off fireworks is not legal, but people will do it anyway. And there's just so many people doing it that the cops are like, not worth our time to like try to do anything about this. So, don't
So
incriminate yourself, obviously, with any plans to blow up a small chunk of the Netherlands. But do you think that other people might set off fireworks anyway?
So the good thing for me is like I live on the 11th floor and I'm overlooking some neighborhoods that very much don't care about any kind of regulations. They would already get their fireworks somewhere across the border where you can get more heavy fireworks, so they won't be affected as much, and nor will the show that I have over here. So
So when someone
it'll be
goes
nice.
across the border for the good fireworks, you talking about in like Belgium or into like Germany?
Either of those works. It just depends
Either works.
on like you need to be on time to get them because
Yeah.
they also do like checks at the border, and I don't know. If you
Okay.
get caught,
Okay.
it's double as expensive. So yeah.
Do they let you keep them? Is it like a fine? You get the firework back, or do they take the
Uh,
fireworks?
uh, no, yeah, then you have to go again next weekend.
Yeah. 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 Fair enough. How about down in Argentina, Kevin? Any big fireworks holidays there?
Not so much, but today is Argentinian Independence Day, so
Oh,
none of the
nice.
Argentinians are working today. I celebrated the U.S. Independence Day last week, so um,
Fair enough.
I think at New Year's they might do fireworks. I live in the center of Buenos Aires, and so there's none here.
Right. Right. Dense urban environment.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, what announcements do we have this week, Tim? Since I've been out since basically our last Code Remix stream, I'm looking forward to finding out what happened.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so we have a couple of quick announcements. Way too often when we do the show on a Wednesday and we also do releases on a Wednesday, I'm still halfway through the release that we're doing right now. But I can tell you the number that it's going to be, so it's 857.0. And I'll do a summary of everything that is, made it into this fix, yeah, probably over the next couple of hours. But it is already available, and as is the corresponding Maven and Gradle plugin versions and the rewrite recipe bomb. But we're still finalizing exactly, yeah, giving you the summary of how much new recipes we have and who will contribute it and all of that. So look for that probably on our X and Blue Sky and other channels by the end of the day. And then looking ahead, we thought it would be fun to already show you some of the efforts that we're working towards, because there is, of course, no shortage of new versions coming out. First off, there's going to be Java 25 coming out in September. And we've added some like itemized things that we know need to happen when we build out support for new Java versions. So if you want to get involved, then you can already do so. So go find the issue that we have there, which is just a partial for Java 25. And once we have that, we can start to merge some of the recipes to update you to Java 25. We already have a few in progress, but of course they're blocked right now by not having a partial. So it should be interesting there. And then similarly, we're eyeing a Spring Boot 4 migration recipe. So if you want to get involved there, right now the release notes, they're very sparse. There's only, I think, one item on there. But we're going to build this out towards November when the new version comes out, so that you can migrate pretty much on day one is our plan. So if you want to get involved with that, and also reach out. And then on that similar vein, you'll also be upgraded to Hibernate 7 as part of that upgrade to the newer Spring Boot version.
And if those fill up, we plan to do this on some ongoing basis. Like the next dates, I don't believe have been selected, and if they have, probably not announced. But there will be a follow-ups for these at some point.
Yep, absolutely. So we plan to do these roughly monthly, and we also want to alternate a bit in terms of time zones. So the current time zone that we have is very much amenable to folks in the US. But it's somewhat late for the folks in Europe, and it's very, very late or early for the folks in Asia, more towards Australia. So we will be accommodating those as well. So know that if it doesn't fit your schedule this week or this month, then maybe the month after that would be better.
Right on, right on. And that brings us to the main topic of today's podcast, live stream, whatever this is, which is Kevin and the Moderne SaaS and the creation thereof. Kevin, welcome to the show for the third time. I know we had you on once for an episode, which was a lot of fun, of just sharing like fun stories from our software development careers. But is this your second appearance?
I think this is my 4th time. I went back to try to figure it out, but ChatGPT was not amenable to like looking it up for me, and I couldn't be bothered to go look down through the list. So I remember Coding Horrors. Lindsay and I talked about the Builder. I think you both weren't available.
That's right.
And then I was here for the like post Code Remix Summit discussion,
right.
and then so I think this is my 4th appearance.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about the Moderne SaaS. How you built it, since you personally built all of it, right?
I will take credit for some of it. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Which hopefully it is, because I went to the effort of doing this. So as a former Amazon employee, I'm mildly allergic to PowerPoint presentations, but it was the best way I could figure out to share this information with the
I mean, if you prefer to circulate around a white paper, we could have a live stream of all of us quietly reading a document.
Yeah,
for
that's a good point. It'd be about 20 minutes, so maybe we'll do that next time.
Yeah.
Not super great for the podcast format. So I joined. Well, I'll give a little background on me. So as you mentioned, I've been here a couple times, but I'll just give an introduction to who I am and what I care about. So when I first started my career, I worked at Shelter Insurance I built their auto quote, renter's quote, and purchase and whatnot, and a few other things there, but enterprise software, and got to experience the financial sector and insurance and the good and bad things about that. And then that's where I worked with Jonathan, our CEO. So when he and I left around the same time, where he went to Netflix and I went to Amazon, and at Amazon, I worked on a service that was called on every single product page render. So heavy caching, but it still served, something like 1 billion requests an hour. So it's kind of uniquely qualified to, along with the other folks that we've hired for the SaaS and platform team.
So not that unique, then.
Right. Well,
if you're not the only one.
Right. Uniquely in terms of unique as a group, we're uniquely qualified to build software
good
to help customers solve their enterprise software remediation needs. So, and just a little bit more about me. I've been here for 4.5 years, started in March of 2021, and Sam was my first boss here. And then at a different point in time, I was a manager and Tim reported to me. So Tim's kind of Sam's grand report. And now he's a manager. So, just it's been a real evolution of the company since we first joined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And then
you can almost call it rotating roles. Like at some point, Sam's going to take over again, and then
right.
It's entirely possible. Hey, it just depends on what's needed at any given moment.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're all a testament to that fact. Working for a startup, being willing to do whatever is the most important thing at that moment, wherever we can be the most effective.
Absolutely.
Sam's talked about me accidentally on the stream before. I'm a language enthusiast. I know Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish. I speak conversational Portuguese. Waiters will respond to me in Italian. And then I'm currently learning Arabic and Greek, and both of those are considerably different and much harder than those other 3 languages, which are very closely related.
You're doing something right accent-wise if people don't immediately respond to you in English as soon as you start talking to them.
That's fair. So Italians, Argentinians, Brazilians, and Italians are famously very nice to people who make an effort to speak their language. So that helps a lot, which would not be the case in other countries for their language.
Sure. I was very impressed when you crash studied Portuguese for 2 weeks and then did a business meeting in Portuguese. It's like one of your first times speaking it, right?
That was my first time speaking it, but it was 5 months of study beforehand. So
okay, so there was more time than I recalled.
I wish that it was 2 weeks, because that's a much better story. I'm so sorry.
It's a much better story. I'm probably going to remember it that way, even though you've corrected me.
That's fine. You're free to. And then I'm a huge fan of video games and traveling, which is why learning these languages makes sense. And then just some fun facts about the SaaS. So I've started about 4.5 years ago. There were 3 repositories at that point, and over that time we've had about getting close to 20,000 commits, and about 2,000 of those are mine. We've had many different folks touch the SaaS code during that time. And as of July 8th, we now have 3.6 billion lines of code in only app.moderne.io. I originally had the total across all the customer tenants and whatnot, but I felt like maybe that's not a number that needs to be shared publicly right now. Sure. And 39,000 repositories.
Sense of the scale achievable with a single installation. Not that this is the limit or anything, but I feel
and it's for sure not, because we have at least one customer that has more than this already, and more in the pipeline as well. And then of all of our services that we're about to talk about, we've deployed them. We've deployed made over 8,000 deployments. Just looking at the tag count on the repositories. So yeah, and you can see this is just the last 90 days, and you can see, we've hover here right around 3 billion lines of code, but it, bumps up every so often. We ingest a whole bunch more repos for various reasons. And yeah, we're getting closer and closer to that 4 billion mark.
Looks like based on the size of those little vertical jumps on the graph that the next one will cross that line. So it looks like it goes up by a few hundred million every time it jumps.
I remember when we first looked at this, we were like, is that number? Because it was 2 billion when we first looked at what was in app. And we were like, Is that right? That can't be right. And so we did we went and did spot check of several of the biggest repos that showed up. We downloaded all the data, looked at spot checks of the repos that were in there, and came to the conclusion that yes, the way that you calculate what a line of code is different. I think we were just counting \ns, new line characters. But yeah, that was the number that we came to. And then this is a stack of all of the commits to all of the SaaS services over the course of the last 4.5 years. You can see with the colors rotating in and out, there's been a few different people that have come and a couple people that have gone as well. And then a huge spike in this blue in 2023. That's not me. I am this green line. So I went into management around here and still had I don't know if you can see my cursor. Oh, you can. Excellent. And still was doing a lot of, individual contributor work. And then, around here had hired up, most of a team, and then still, a little bit here and there. And then I went back into IC work full time around here. So you can see that expands back out. And yeah, what we're going to focus on today is just like the architecture and how we made decisions over time and things like that. But yeah, Sam interviewed me in 2021, and at the time, I think this was all they had. They had an API, and the API. Well, I guess I didn't. The problem statement was we have this refactoring technology because lots of folks have all of this code that they haven't touched in a while, or that they're afraid to touch, or that needs a lot of modernization. And we built this this framework, OpenRewrite, to help them do that. But OpenRewrite at the time was, I think even still to some extent, required you to change your POM or your build.gradle for each time you wanted to run a different recipe. I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's still the case in the OpenRewrite plugins.
Yeah, there's a way you can specify the recipe name on the command line, throwing in like a -d system property, and it's like rewrite.recipe equals, but you would have to add the plugin, or like with Maven, you could specify the Gav coordinates of the plugin and get around that. But there's limitations to what you could do purely from the command line without modifying the underlying repository. So many times that would be required. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so, like, the problem statement that was handed to me was, we need to scale this out. You know, let them run it on all of their repositories without having to change any of them. Yeah. And so when I joined, we just had two services. We had the API service, which was responsible for listing out the repositories that had been ingested into it, running recipes on those, and that was it, because we didn't support committing, we didn't support there was no dashboard or anything, there was no user home, no user settings, nothing, just this API which managed all of that. And then this ingest service, which you would send, it was I think we also had a page for it. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry, I don't have any screenshots of the old SaaS, and it made me really sad as I was building this.
I bet we have some old YouTube videos, clips. I don't think we've deleted. I don't think we've deleted them. So I think there are some old clips, like, before we had any social media people or proper marketing department, I was in there making video clips of the early SaaS and the OpenRewrite build plugins. So we could go look those up. Although we got a question from the chat of like, why do we build the landing page using Webflow rather than building it on your own? I think that is probably talking about the Moderne.ai website, right, rather than the SaaS itself. And because we don't use Webflow for the SaaS, I don't think, right?
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. I don't have an answer to. I mean, the Moderne.ai website is separate from app.moderne.io and our individual customer tenants as well. And then I also see a question in the chat about the number of repos. So so do you want to highlight that?
Yeah. So the set of repositories we've ingested, they're not all ours. We don't have 40,000 repositories, but these are ingested from across all of GitHub's open source repositories. So if you go on app.moderne.io and log in with your GitHub account, or I think you can also log in with the Bitbucket account, you can take a look at the set of repositories that are ingested, and those are just open source repositories from across GitHub, and we scaled up to that number partially to test the service out to make sure that this would work at the scale of a large bank or insurance company or whatever other large enterprise might need this, as well as to provide a service and a utility to the open source community of working with like a security researcher to try to broadly patch a vulnerability across many repositories, or to try to survey and sample the attributes or the prevalence of a particular dependency across all of open source. In any situation where you want to kind of holistically ask and answer a question of what the state of open source is, having a large number of repositories in there can be helpful.
Yeah, we have in the Moderne organization a lot fewer. I think total, including repositories for utilities and stuff, we have 105. If I remember correctly,
sounds right.
The 38,000 are how many LSTs, so individual repositories that have been converted into lossless semantic tree format and then ingested into the platform for running recipes on them. And we had for a long time, app.moderne.io was intentionally underscaled to be, sort of more have more repositories and require and fewer resources than all of our customers, and then we onboarded more customers, and they sort of blew that number out of the water. And so now we've been, we've scaled a lot. That's a little bit of a spoiler for a few slides down, but yeah, some scaling challenges which were really fun to overcome.
Yeah.
We in this early point in 2021, our goal was to ingest all of GitHub, which current estimates put the number of repositories in GitHub at about 420 million. And I think at this point we had 100 repositories in the platform ingested. So I remember fighting with GeoTools over its conditional statement that was like tens of thousands of if nested if statements, and not that many more. And so we realized, I think, at that point that we were going to be chasing edge cases forever instead of actually delivering what enterprise software engineers really needed at that point, which was a way to scale OpenRewrite. And so we ended up just, I think your team, so Sam was working on the OpenRewrite team at the time. I think he was the lead of the OpenRewrite team. Yeah. And I was working on the SaaS team. And so we had, I don't know why I put that in quotes, that's what they were.
The SaaS team.
Right. And we had a race to see if the number of recipes would go up faster or the number of repositories. And I think at the time we had I remember us crossing 100 recipes and it being a really exciting moment. And now we're at 4,000.
Now that's a Tuesday. And, yeah.
Right, exactly. You have one person put in 100 refaster recipes, or Claude Code build the hibernate recipe and have that reviewed. Sorry, what were you going to say, Sam?
It's just that it was always a losing race for recipe development, coming up with new novel pieces of software rather than taking existing software and producing LSTs from it. Although speaking of, what the old SaaS looked like, I went back to one of our old YouTube videos. And you remember this when there was 3 buttons on the left?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we've got old YouTube videos of what the SaaS used to look like, which is some of this still looks fairly familiar. In terms of
I think that
the
page
interface.
still looks pretty similar to that.
Yeah.
I think it was the first week that we got the design colleague on there that the icons already changed and immeasurably improved.
Oh yeah, there's the old recipe builder without the 3D visualization. Yeah. So yeah, there are old videos on our YouTube channel. So I was just scrolling down back to that one was from 4 years ago. Yeah, it was one of these. Yeah, this is the one I looked at.
Yeah, so
there's
that'll
still
be
some history available.
Nice. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so that was the big deal back in early 2021. We had just that ingest service, so it was one repo at a time, and it took a while, and you'd get an ingest job key back from the API, and have to watch to see what actually happened with it.
And were we farming that out to Jenkins, or was that our own
at the time
CI kind of system?
It was we will in a future slide talk about Jenkins, but at the time this was just actually running on a service, a Spring Boot service, that just took that, ran the OpenRewrite or I think Moderne build plugin, built Maven or Gradle, and then produced an LST. And I believe, I don't actually remember where we stored it at that point. We might have been putting those in S3 at that point. But yeah, it got a lot better later on. So the big major challenge at this point was that we were building the plane as it was landing, so we didn't have any customers yet. We had a few design partners that we were working closely with to sort of figure out what they needed, what the best way for them to use this platform would be. And then this API service handling everything was causing challenges. So when it was running a recipe, it couldn't do anything else. It couldn't respond to requests.
Oh man, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, bringing back memories now. Why is it not responding? And so the very first thing that I was tasked with, I think I made some changes to the UI before we'd hired the UI team, and it's not my strong suit. And so I was very happy when we hired the team to go and undo all the things I had done. was the first thing I really had to do was untangle recipe running from the rest of the API. And so
Right.
what was the API service now became an API gateway, literally just using Spring Cloud Gateway to forward through to the right service. We chose GraphQL for the API. And because we now had separate services, we had to decide, well, do we want these being served from the same graph, or do we want them to each be served from their own individual graph? And then when you're connecting to the API, you've got to specify that separately. And so we ended up deciding we're just going to serve them from the same graph. And so we spun up the Apollo, I forget what's called, the Apollo server, federation server maybe, which federates the GraphQL graph across multiple individual graphs. And so we split out management of repositories from all of this first, and then split out actually running recipes. And so we knew that we had to be able to horizontally scale workers. And so we looked into, I think I remember looking into Apache Flink and proposing Apache Flink, and then being having pretty deep conversations about how frustrating Zookeeper is to manage, and how you need an entire team just to maintain a Zookeeper instance, and how we decided, we had, I don't know, like 3 backend engineers at the time, and one of those was our CEO, who's also doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And so we're like, okay, let's not do that. Let's keep this simple. These worker services will just be more Spring Boot applications that when they start up will register themselves with the orchestration service, this recipe execution service here.
Yeah,
and I think
no shade on Zookeeper, but I remember at a previous job at Tableau Software, I used Zookeeper for service coordination, and I wasn't directly involved with it, except that I did go to a presentation given by one of my colleagues about like anti-patterns to avoid and common mistakes to make, and things that it would make it more difficult to manage Zookeeper. And the main thing I remember was that he had a lot of things you shouldn't do.
So yeah, I think we chose simplicity as the key architectural decision at that point. Like, keep this as simple as you can until you can't anymore. And I think I didn't go into the back end for any of this in any of these slides, but we were using Redis, just literally a caching layer for everything, instead of using a NoSQL or a SQL database as the back end, as the storage layer. And so the entire queue. In Redis, you can specify an expiration, and so we just had these recipe runs. All information about them expire after 3 days, and we're like, oh, now we don't have to worry about space constraints because it's all going to get deleted after 3 days anyway. And it made things a lot simpler for that period in our existence. And I think
and of course, really the LSTs themselves, the important thing were stored elsewhere in an artifactory or other repository.
And I think at this point we were still using that ingest service and storing them and just storing them directly in S3. I mean, we weren't even at this point in 2021. We weren't even encrypting those yet because like I said, we didn't have any customers, and so the security was built up over time. But at this point, there wasn't very much of it. So we had security around like being able to log into the platform, and it was just whoever had a GitHub account could log in. And I think we had all of this deployed on GCP at the time. So yeah, major challenges at that point were this horizontal scaling of workers, and I think we decided to build those into. I think we were using a ring hash at the time, and so what would happen is
I remember discussion about that. Yeah,
we've gone back and forth on that, but you were using a ring hash, and the problem with a ring hash is if you increase the number of nodes or decrease the number of nodes or elements on the ring, the rest of the things that are assigned to the members of the ring get distributed. They can change hands. They'll all change hands, pretty much guaranteed. And so I think at this point we're using a ring hash for that, which meant every time a new worker connected or a worker disconnected, all of the repositories got reassigned. And so any of the benefits you got from storing the LST, like having the LST and its results live on that worker, they would all go unavailable because that repository would get reassigned. So yeah, that I think we were also using GCP's equivalent of spot instances I think for this slide and the next slide, we were using GCP Spot instances, and those can live for a maximum of 24 hours. And so we just had a guaranteed redeploy of all of our services every 24 hours. So even though we were storing
That's
recipe
a
results
sexy
for,
feature.
yeah, well, I mean, it was, because then later on we're like, oh, these workers can live a lot longer now, and now they're running out of disk space, and we've got to solve a different problem. So that led us into late 2021. We're still in the same year somehow. So
There's a lot more
I'm
boxes on this chart.
There are, yes. I'm really sorry to Mike, who's going to have to view this later and can't tell the difference between these colors. But so I'll just call it out. Ingest is red and was removed.
This is a cruel joke to the red-green colorblind.
It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. I just don't know how to represent this differently. So the ingest service is gone. The repositories are gone, and now we have all of this like in a cloud environment. And then we have, a customer environment here too. So instead of publishing or just, sending a repository URL to ingest, we now have Jenkins producing LSTs using those Moderne build plugins, and then publishing those to, in most cases, Artifactory, although you can publish them to really any Maven compatible repository. And then we built this artifact storage service that makes a request out to Artifactory, which at the time was only available to be, one that was accessible over the public internet, and then asks for a set of updates, a set of LSTs, and then downloads them and stores them in S3.
Do you remember roughly how many repositories we had at this time?
Man, it would have been great to have. We only started capturing that data probably 2 years ago. But you found that screenshot that you shared from that video, was from late 2021 or maybe mid 2021.
Yeah, that would have been around this time.
It didn't say how many repositories there were.
I didn't
probably fewer than 1,000 still.
Yeah, I do remember that already. That the Jenkins UI was for ingest running all these jobs was becoming nearly unusable.
Yeah, and it did eventually become completely unusable. So, slight foreshadowing. We also don't anybody ask me after this talk about these version numbers, because they're more demonstrative than anything else. Don't ask me about SaaS version 3, because I will have immediately forgotten what this means.
Sure.
But these are evolutions of our architecture. So we also built the ability to submit pull requests, and I think at the time we weren't even checking if you had access to these repos, because again, up until around this point, we didn't have any customers, and then around this point we're starting to get customers, right? And so of course, you need to make sure that the user has access to those repos in order to even show them results, even for them to see the code in those repos. And so we built this, I think at the time we were calling this Moderne GitHub microservice. And I think it was even predates it being called Moderne SCM, which could only make requests out to github.com to check if you had access. And we found out later on that the API for, at least in 2021, might not have been the case earlier, but at least in 2021, the APIs for github.com and GitHub Enterprise on-premise were the same, which was just like a boon, kind of a tailwind that we were surprised and happy about.
Very convenient.
Yeah.
And
but the case. No, it is, yeah. Bitbucket is not at all the same. Like bitbucket.org and Bitbucket on-prem or Bitbucket data center, which used to be Stash, not the same at all. And that was a problem for the next slide. The major challenges of this were, actually committing to work, of course, but that's just, building software. But we also locked down all of our services at this time. So as even at Amazon, you could SSH into production boxes if you had permission, and you had to elevate an access request and things like that. But you could still do it. It was still a possible thing to do. But we can't SSH into any production box for any of our tenants. And so getting used to using metrics over logs, and using metrics for understanding what's happening inside these services became just like a naturalized part of our life. But it was very difficult at first for all of us to adapt to that. Very important for our security posture. Were you going to say something, Tim?
No, I think it's been something of a getting used to working at Moderne. Like the folks would start at the company, and in their first month, they would suggest to do more logging, and then you get told, no, that's not what we do. And then, I don't know, they pick it up again on the second month, and then after that, they kind of start to learn that metrics are the way forward. And, that's just how
I had the benefit, I think. Go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was going to ask if this was the time, speaking of SCM, where we were having a lot of fun trying to deal with the GitHub API's unpredictable rate limiting.
No, we're not even there yet. That was that's an awesome one.
Look forward to that in version 4 or 5.
Yeah. I had the benefit of I got used to the no logging thing, because most outages that I dealt with at Amazon were caused by logging just gone crazy, like somebody putting an error log that they expected to happen once in a blue moon, that some other service was down and it was hitting that error log constantly. And so I don't know the percentage, but some large number of production outages at Amazon are caused by logging. So I was sympathetic to the change here to not focus on logging. I think we also at this point we're starting to migrate our backend from Redis, for most things, from Redis to Postgres, and specifically I think we used Aurora in AWS for the Postgres there, because customers starting to ask, oh, can you persist these for longer? 3 days, 1 day to 3 days is not enough for these to live. We're like, well, when workers are redeployed, you lose all of those results. That's part of our security posture. And they're like, yeah, but we could go rerun the recipe. So we added the ability to rerun recipes that have been run before, because LSTs change so frequently. At the time, the parsers were changing all the time too, but so you had to rebuild your LSTs, super frequently. And even still, we, make fixes and updates to parsers relatively frequently. So LSTs need to keep being rebuilt. But it meant that those results go out of date really quickly anyway. So, but yeah, we added the recipe run history, so you could go look at recipes that were run. I think it started with a week and then 10 days. And then eventually we just said, all right, we'll just keep it forever. And then in early 2022, we're starting to get a corpus of customers. We recognized the need for, so I think our 2 first big customers used Bitbucket Data Center instead of GitHub. And so, okay, well, now this is no longer Moderne GitHub, this is Moderne SCM. And also, we can't access their Bitbucket over the public internet. So we have to have some way, some service running inside their environment that will let us communicate with it. And so we never really looked at the option of making them expose anything to the public internet, as in allowing ingress into their environment. Instead, we built this agent, which is a pretty common way to handle this. We probably need a better name for this now that agent is almost exclusively referring to agentic or coding agents or agentic workflows and things like that. But this is a service. Again, Spring Boot, it's just a jar that runs inside the customer environment and connects out over the public internet to the API gateway for each tenant. And then this grants access. So that also means that any secrets that are needed to access Artifactory or Bitbucket don't ever have to leave the customer environment. So that connects to API gateway, and that establishes a connection over layer 7. And just a WebSocket connection. And then any requests that we need to make into the customer environment are done over that connection. They don't have to open the only hole they have to open is a public internet, a hole that allows this agent to connect to the public internet. And it can connect over an internal proxy and things like that too. Of course, that came much later, but at the time, it just had to have public internet access to the API gateway. And now you can do it we can do VPC peering or private link. Really, it just needs to have access to this API gateway. We also added the ability to automate anything you can do in the API with personal access tokens. So we built the token service at this time too. We also at this time, I can't remember if we did this before, but I distinctly remember us doing this at this point, was because we were connecting using our socket as the connection mechanism, we had to make all of our services compatible with Netty. And so that meant for Spring Boot, that meant using Spring Webflux and Reactor. And so it took a lot of getting used to switch our programming paradigms to Reactor. And now we're kind of like, I don't know that we're regretting it, but we're considering like, when does it make sense to use it, and then not use it anywhere it doesn't make sense. So anywhere you need just direct access to anything, we're not reaching for Reactor anymore. Reactor is for when you're doing inter-service communication. It has been really, really important for us that agent can stay, it can do this sort of asynchronous IO via Netty, and not go down when we're making a lot of requests out to this artifact repository or to Bitbucket and GitHub.
So agent is still Reactor based.
Yeah, I mean, it all, because it all has to, pretty much every service that we have back here in the Moderne cloud environment has to make requests into the customer environment. The pieces of code that make those requests are still reactive, and they always will. They will likely always be until, you know, Spring has a virtual thread, a Loom version that works well with Netty.
Right.
But until then, yeah, they'll probably likely always be Reactor based. But now we're not reaching for Reactor when, you know, just doing something that we can calculate using information available inside the service itself. By now, I mean 2025, not 2022. And so learning the biggest challenges of version 4 were learning Reactor and then proxying those requests through the agent, because we were essentially just using web client to make those requests, and we added a connector to web client to be able to connect to the Moderne agent and then make those requests there. And the Moderne agent has a set of I forget what these are called. We just call them filters, exchange filter functions, I think they're called in Spring. And it just goes through those, and for each one of the applications it's calling out to, signs that request or adds an authorization header to that request, whatever it needs to do in order to authorize the request that's being made. And that's how we're able to avoid leaking any of those credentials from agent. They just live on the agent, and then requests are made out to the services internal. In 2023, we built the organization service, and this allowed customers to pipe in their actual, you know, like LDAP organizations, and then use those as a set of repositories to run on. And this was a fantastic decision that also was later very difficult to undo. So Sam and Tim know that we've been now, you know, trying to get rid of this service completely for a better way of managing organization hierarchies, and very close to accomplishing that. And as part of the organization service, or making things organization based, we also started I think in 2023 we built the first and second version of what we now call Dev Center, which at the time we were calling the organization dashboard. And there may or may not be a video out there for that, but we've tried a few different things. Like at first we're like, okay, well, we're going to run like the Spring Boot 3 upgrade recipe and the Java 17 at the time upgrade recipe on every single repository. And the ones that have results will be considered as non-compliant, and the ones that don't have results will be considered as compliant, meaning they've upgraded to the latest. And then we'll show that on the dashboard, and we can show that over time. If you've used the Spring Boot 3 and Java upgrade migration recipes, I guess they're better now, but at the time they were very slow. And so we tried to run this on every single repository in each tenant
Performance
every
is better
night.
now, but they're also larger. You know, more steps
Right.
get added as new versions of Spring and such come out.
Yeah, so we've made a lot of performance improvements, but also, yeah, each step is much. Each individual step, there's more of them now. Each step gets better, but the number goes up. So, so that was, of course, never going to happen. You know, I think we ended up I think we had 16,000 some repositories at the time, maybe 12,000, and we just never finished. It would just run for hours, and there would just be a few that were left over. But because we couldn't serve up the results until it was all done, we ended up scrapping that completely and going a different route. We built visualizations, which I don't think I even included on here, which are just Jupyter notebooks. We have another Spring Boot microservice that runs Jupyter notebooks and then displays the results. So every time you run a recipe, it produces data tables, which can also produce, you know, just a visualization to the user. And so we built that up around the same time. Our second version of the org dashboard was just a set of visualizations that we just ran a smaller set of recipes on a smaller number of repositories and then displayed the results of those visualizations. And then we also got rid of CI pipelines and started the process of something called mass ingest. I think we started building the CLI in 2020, or we built the first version of the Moderne CLI in 2023, which let us do this mass ingest. And mass ingest here is just a single or a set of boxes that run the CLI to build LSTs in a loop, essentially. Instead of running them on CI, you just have a central team at each customer site run this mass ingest, and then you can see, trends of that, how it's performing over time. Instead of waiting for a change to the code, this lets you pick up new versions of the CLI, new parsers, much more quickly.
And I have to say, it's a much better experience than having 35,000 Jenkins jobs.
Right.
You try to open on a page somewhere.
Yeah, you click the wrong page in the CI UI, and it's just doesn't even render. It gives up.
Yeah, Jenkins exactly. Jenkins would just give up, and that wasn't even the main reason we made that change, but it was a benefit because we're like, man, this Jenkins is just unusable now. Still at this point, we had app.moderne.io, but we're still besides app.moderne.io, every instance of Moderne was single tenant, so we'd spin up one cloud environment for each customer. But in 2024, that changed. And so in 2024, we've added the ability to be multi-tenant. And so I think we went back and forth on this. We had public.moderne.io, and then when we went multi-tenant, it became app.moderne.io again, but no longer deployed to GCP. We also built the Dev Center in 2024. So the Dev Center is the version of the org dashboard that we have now, where there's a whole other video of me talking about the Dev Center on our. Oh, I'm not. Let's share this tab instead. So I'm on the wrong organization. It's all default. Yeah. Okay. Dev Center. So this is what it is now. And so instead of running the entire Spring Boot 3 recipe and then waiting for the results of that, we run a set of much smaller, much faster recipes that give you, like, do you have to do a major version upgrade, a minor version upgrade, or so on. And we're even working on a new version of this that should be out pretty soon, that you just run a recipe. Instead of having this run in the background, you just run a recipe and it displays in the same way. Oh, I'm jumping ahead accidentally. At this point, so the main challenge this year was scaling to meet customer needs. So our workers at that point, I think we had spun up maybe 20, maybe 15, 20 at the most, and we had a customer come in who needed 35 of them. And so we had to, we started looking at, various bottlenecks in our application. So the artifact index, getting the organizations from the organization service. And so we started realizing that, okay, well, what we don't want to do is for every single one of these, 50, 60,000 repositories, make a request out to the organization service to get the organizations it's in, because that is just killing both their agent and their organization service. We instead want to get a full view of their organization service, just ask for that full view of their organization hierarchy. And so this is still green here and probably should be yellow. It was a change to how we get the organization hierarchy. So instead of getting it one by one, we're getting it like wholesale or paginated, and then listing out the repositories that belong to it. Because of mass ingest, you have to define all of the repos that you're going to build anyway. And so we just expanded that out into, well, your repo CSV can also specify the organizations that your repositories belong to, and we can build the organization hierarchy from there. And then that brings us to today. So this year we've, essentially we've deprecated the organization service for serving up an organization hierarchy. And instead in Moderne Agent, you're just giving that repo CSV that you provided to mass ingest. And then we've also done a lot of focus, like a lot of companies, on using the tools that we have available and making them available to AI agents. So we built Modi, both for SaaS and for, we have a Madi desktop as well that we announced at Code Remix Summit. Sorry, this is also Code Remix, which can connect to an on-premise LLM provider for example, Anthropic or OpenAI. And being able to take the power of the LST and recipes and let them not, let AI not consume all of the tokens that you have available, but instead use the size of the LSTs and the power of multi-repo to be able to give you actually good answers to your questions. And so what's been really cool with Claude is it can not just go figure out what's going on in your code, but also give you a cool bar chart of all of the things that you're, your usage of Jackson, and really anything that has a numerical answer to it.
Everyone loves a cool bar chart.
Yeah. We also removed, like I said, we deprecated the organizations. Oh, I already mentioned that. Yeah, sorry. And yeah, the major challenges for this year have just been, well, where do recipes fit in the AI world, or more accurately, where does AI fit in the recipe world? Because they're kind of like I was a skeptic of AI for a long time, and then using Madi, I'm like, this is exactly how I've wanted to use Moderne for the last few years. I think Sam probably remembers a one-on-one where I was like, hey, I wish I could just, I have to type in the name of the recipe I want. I have to know the recipe I want. I want to just tell Moderne what I want, and it just goes and does it. Or ask it the question. And now with Madi, that's exactly what it does. And so it's giving the power of
the recipe catalog was already unwieldy, years ago when it was 1,000 recipes rather than like 4,000.
Right. Yeah, and so that brings us to today. I didn't even talk about that's basically all I've got to share. I didn't even talk about the move from Rewrite 7 to Rewrite 8.
Oh, that was big, yeah.
So Rewrite 7, you had to have the workers had to have the entire LST for each repository in memory. And that was causing workers to die, especially as we got more and more repositories in the application. And so Rewrite 8 was a move toward LSTs are fragments of a repository instead of the entire repository, and you only had to have a fragment in memory at any given time. And so
had to change the whole recipe execution lifecycle to orient things in such a way that you would stream a few repositories through at a time, and no more random access to every LST in the group.
That brought its own set of challenges, of course, because now you have the entire thing on disk. You have to serialize and deserialize each chunk as you go through. And then you serialized the edits of those chunks out. I think there's the concept in Rewrite now, since, 2023, of a large source set, which is really any sort of an LST, any representation. And then we, of course, have our own version in Moderne, which does exactly what I described, that serialization and deserialization. And that was weeks of challenging development.
It was hard to get the graphs serializing and deserializing correctly, particularly the type information.
Right.
Since, an LST representing the structure of a text document is necessarily not, finite and acyclic, because documents do not have infinite length. But the type information, types reference each other all the time, right? Just Java lang object, in its method definitions and return types and parameter types in those methods references like 60 types or something like that. I looked at one point, and getting that to serialize correctly was a challenge. Since that first version, Canute has in particular made a lot of improvements to how things are serialized.
Yeah, tons of performance improvements have been made, in large part thanks to Canute over the past, few, how long has he been here now? A little over 2 years, 2.5 years. Yeah.
Well, Well, yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that tour of the history of the SaaS. And we skipped right over the rate limiting bit. I remember that was
Oh
that was
yeah,
dramatic.
sorry.
How I
Uh,
mean, that's not that that's like the most important thing or anything. I just remember how hard it was working with the GitHub API and trying to figure out how to space out requests so it wouldn't just start failing things.
That was a challenge for us over the course of multiple years. I think we finally got that nailed down like end of last year, beginning of this year. But yeah, GitHub has, and they've changed it too since then, since we started with it, to the version that we now have working. But GitHub, when we started, like you could submit something like a maximum of one put or post request per second. And so we ended up like we did tried to minimize retries and do exponential back off and things like that. And eventually we just pass those through a leaky bucket. And so you just queue up those requests inside of the microservice now. And then you just wait for each user for it to like filter through the leaky bucket. And they changed it again this year. And now they provide
the leaky bucket.
That's what we do. You wait for the request to filter through the leaky bucket. That's an actual algorithm that I learned about through the course of building this platform.
Oh yeah. Wait, I'm not familiar with this algorithm. How's that?
Well, I
how's it
mean,
working?
okay, so you tell it how frequently to let requests through, and then it knows when the request came in and how long until the next request will come out, and you just check every second or so if there's any requests that can now filter through the leaky bucket. And so when you reach that point, you're like, okay, there's 3 requests that have can pass through now, and you let them pass through, or send them off, like you queue them up and send them off. But yeah, it's called leaky bucket.
It's fun. It sounds like I don't know, some like redneck engineering for like a filter for I don't know, like a garden filter or something like that, or like I replace some some component. Who needs a carburetor on the car? I just use a leaky bucket.
Yeah, but that worked for a long time, and they changed the rate limiting again this year. And I think we actually only let it through 1 per every 2 seconds instead of 1 every second. And yeah, this year they changed it again. And so, but now they're providing headers that tell you when you can send a new request. And so if we hit that, we're just like, okay, you can't do anything until this point. So it's a bucket with a valve on the bottom, I guess, now too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good. What have you learned from this? Like, if knowing what you know now, if you were to go back, would you have done anything differently? I mean, the org service we probably would have done differently. Like, let's just do generate a repost.csv from the get-go. It's definitely one area where we started off complicated and then moved towards simplicity over time.
I think so. I don't think I would have done that much differently, if I'm being honest, because we made the decisions we made based on where we were at the time, the number of people we had, and the customer base, and the need to get things done. And so, like the evolution of the platform, I think looking back, maybe would have reapproached the org dashboard differently. We did eventually, but it was through evolution of like failed attempts that we learned what to do. So like knowing what I know now, the dev center that we're building or about to release right now is how I would have done it from the get-go. And we tried to, but the recipes were too slow, and so like
it wasn't quite there yet.
Right.
Yeah.
We've gone through a number of evolutions on workers as well. Part of that rewrite 8 change that we made to serialize and deserialize repositories on workers causes us to go through a chunk now of an LST. And then if the LST is too big, we just yield. Like we back off and then let it yield to other repositories. And I think instead of doing that, we're even evaluating this now. Instead of yielding and letting other repositories through, like if we have the capacity, just run the entire thing and then let other things queue up behind that, knowing that we will get to it much quicker. Like we've made enough performance improvements at this point that we can do that.
So no more yielding?
Yeah, I think we're in the process of designing a way to make the queue fair and know that you're still going to get through it, but without having recipes yield to each other, repositories yield to each other. Because what we find is those they don't sit and yielded forever, but the recipe run just sits, for hours and hours without finishing. And so while it will let smaller recipe runs through and finish, the big ones will never get done.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, managing distributed systems is always a challenge.
Yep. We did end up. There was a period of time where we ended up making decisions that pushed us toward a distributed monolith, and we've gotten out of that habit now. So like our microservices are microservices now, and maybe the other thing I would do differently is focus on making sure we're not building a distributed monolith early on.
What's the difference between having a distributed monolith and microservices?
A distributed monolith is very interdependent, so all of your services have a lot of dependencies on each other. And if you're going to build a monolith, it's often better to just build it as a monolith and put it on the same box and scale that box to the level it needs to be, and then have all those interconnected dependencies happen within the same application. And we could have done that. Like we could have built the API up without horizontally scaling workers, just given it much beefier boxes, and we could still go that route. I don't think now that we have horizontally scalable services.
My question about the architecture is this: like, it makes sense that recipe workers are horizontally scalable. Is anything else really horizontally scalable?
Yeah, I mean, really so SCM, for instance, the microservices that manages pushing out commits and pull requests and whatnot, is horizontally scalable in that if you're constantly pushing out pull requests, you're going to want to make sure there's always the service available to do that. I think we only have one box running it right now because it hasn't been necessary.
If you didn't, you might run into troubles with that rate limiting, right? Because the rate limiting is part of that.
You'd have to put the rate limit in the database or wherever, like
somewhere else.
Move the rate limiting from in-memory to, but yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why we haven't done that, but it would be horizontally scalable as well.
So it kind of sounds like much of the SaaS, aside from the workers, probably could be a monolith and be fine.
It could. We've talked about that potentially, but it also means like one of our services, all it's responsible for is serving up audit logs. And so it needs a very tiny box in order to be able to serve those up. And so we're able to, put bigger boxes for the things that require more CPUs and require more, like that orchestration service has a pretty beefy box on it because now it serves up repositories and it's responsible for telling workers what to do.
So do you think there are cost savings to doing it this way? Like, is the operational cost better?
The operational cost is for sure better. We can deploy the individual pieces individually, and we can we have, for the most part, zero downtime deployments for our applications.
That is nice.
Yeah. Whereas with a monolith, like you would have to do. I don't think I mentioned this at all. This was supposed to be part of the presentation as well, but our services are all deployed on immutable infrastructure. So we patch, instead of patching security vulnerabilities on running boxes, we just rebake a new image with all the latest security fixes and then redeploy all of our infrastructure once a week.
Right.
And so there's no go restart the box, go kick the box. It's no go redeploy the entire auto scaling group.
Yeah, so I couldn't help but notice on this diagram I didn't see Kubernetes anywhere.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. That's because we don't use Kubernetes for deploying our applications. We actually don't use Docker at all. We do build Docker images, but we deploy them on EC2 instances just using Podman. We used Docker for a while, and we found that Docker was just not worth the overhead. Like it was taking up too many resources and killing our applications that were very healthy. And so we just went the Podman route. We just have Podman build us like a systemd setup script and just run it with cloud in it in our cloud providers.
Yeah, it's already a virtual machine. Why double virtual it?
Right, exactly. Yeah. We haven't needed, despite we actually do run our deployment, or we were for a while, not anymore, running our deployment system. We use Spinnaker to deploy these services. We were running that on Kubernetes for a long time. Kubernetes lets you ask for an amount of CPUs or milli CPUs, I think it is, and an amount of memory, and then it gives you whatever it wants, basically, not exactly what you ask for. And so you deal with like it's the same reason. Go ahead.
It may give you at some point in the future exactly what you ask for.
Right, maybe. And so similar to the Apache Flink, the no Apache Flink decision, we don't we don't use Kubernetes because we want to keep it as simple as possible as necessary.
Right on.
And nor do we have plans to move to Kubernetes.
Indeed. Yeah, it wouldn't solve any of the problems immediately facing us.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, that's kind of taken the hour pretty nicely. I guess, Tim, do you have any final questions or remarks for Kevin?
Yeah, it's maybe like I know working on this platform, we've had a couple of like luckily coincidences or discoveries that led to like, oh well, now that we finally have a name for the thing, like data tables or visualizations, things started to click. And do you have any kind of like discoveries that you want to share there?
So when I first joined, our co-founders talked to me about like the vision for the platform and where it would go eventually. And the phrase I kept hearing was a data warehouse for your code. And we still very much like it. I understood the vision. I didn't have any idea how we were going to get there at that point. And it wasn't until we came up with the idea of data tables and like actually put them into the platform and I started messing around with them that I really understood like this is like being able to SQL query your code. I mean,
yeah,
it is that now. Like it actually is that data warehouse for your code now. And now with agentic workflows and Madi and whatnot, and being able to expose that as an MCP, now you have an AI chatbot that can go make those queries against your data warehouse. And that's been really eye-opening and has turned me around on AI completely.
Yeah, and it isn't going to consume, a billion tokens in order to chew through all of your code because you have a deterministic process doing the hard querying.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no credit card pop up halfway through and need more tokens.
Please insert more coins to continue.
Right. We've dropped you down to Sonnet now. Sorry. Yep.
Well, good stuff. Thanks for coming on, Kevin. Thanks for putting all that work in to prepare that presentation for Tim and I, or at least for myself. I can't speak for Tim. It's a fun little tour down memory lane. I'm like, oh yeah, it did used to be like that. And yeah, anyone who's kind of curious to see what it used to look like, those old clips are still there on YouTube. It's just a bit nostalgic. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Kevin, and I'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
See you all soon. Cheers.
See you all soon.